very moving to be compared to the late Dame Barbara. I wish I could develop a habit of dictating all my books until I read it. It was so restful, just lying back on the sofa and clutching pink Pekingese, letting words flow. Actually, when I was a very young writer, there was a thing called the Best of Young British Authors, and it was just one of these publicity stunts, and they had to go and find 20 writers who were under the age of 30, I think it was, and they told the BBC that one of them must be put onto Desert Island Discs. And they told Roy Plumley there was only one famous one among the list, and he was called Martin Amis. And Roy Plumley said, well, I'm not having that so on the programme. You'll have to find another one. So they chose me, rather strangely. I think they just picked me out of a hat. But one of the records, strange to say, that I chose to go onto the desert island with was Dame Barbara Cartland singing A Nightingale Sang in Barbara's. A journalist called Geoffrey Wheatcroft, who I'm sure is often at these luncheons, wrote a rather angry letter saying, surely he can't be as camp as that. Still working up 20 years later what he meant, but anyway, it's very, very nice, as always, to be asked to the oldie. I'm afraid when I first used to be asked to the oldie, I came rather in the spirit of a vicar, going around the parish and seeing the more elderly members of the population. In a spirit of kindness, that had been my first idea for a career. And I thought to myself, I better go and be kind to the dear old things. I'm sorry to say that now I'm... but you remember that horribly vulgar remark by Tony Blair this year? He went to address something called the Billionaires Club in New York, and he said, the last time I came here, I came as a mere British Prime Minister. Now I've come as one of you. But anyway, this morning when I was looking into the glass, and thinking of that sad Thomas Hardy poem, I look into my glass and view my wasted skin, and think, would God it came to pass, my heart had sunk so thin. I was wondering what to say, and I realised I couldn't actually see the glass until I put my spectacles on. I realised I was a thoroughly qualified member of the Oldie Luncheon Club. So thank you, Richard, very much for having me. As he was kind enough to say, I wrote a book called The Victorians. I then wrote another one, and then now the third. It's publishers, they say, write another one a bit similar. You know, you wrote a book about Peter, now you want to write a book about Paul. And I think it was in a sense a bit of a mistake to say yes to this one. Partly for the reason which Mary Kenny, the other distinguished journalist here on my right, who's lunching with us, was saying to me at lunch. Because with the story of the Victorians, you know how it ends. Well, if you're writing a book called Our Times, you're rather in the position of Oscar Wilde, remember at his Viva in Oxford. They thought, here is this silly young man, not realizing he knew Greek very brilliantly, and they gave him the most difficult passage of the New Testament to translate, the 27th chapter of Acts, which is full of nautical terms. You have to know Greek extremely well to be able to translate it, because it's all the kind of words most of us don't even know in English, about mizens and topmasts and so forth. And when he'd finished it, they said, thank you very much, Mr. Wilde, because they were all fed up with him showing off. And he said, no, please let me go on, I'm longing to see how this wonderful book ends. And I think that is the trouble with writing about modern times. One doesn't know how the story is going to end. Another problem, of course, is that many of the people one's writing about are still alive. And it's rather difficult to know how to treat this subject. If you're a journalist, you're constantly having to avoid people because you've been rude about them. You see them at the opposite corner of the room and you think, better dive under the table. Richard used to say, when I first got to know him, that was why he lived in the country, so he didn't need to know anybody. I go out as little as possible, but my dear wife goes out sometimes, and I hadn't realised there was anything rude in this book, but she's only just started reading it. And now, when I brought her tea in this morning, she said, "How could you? The Heseltines will never want to invite me again." I can't say I feel terribly sorry for her. Richard, when he was at Private Eye, once let Claude Cockburn be a guest editor. And Claude Cockburn had this idea when he went in to see the other young men, that the point of Private Eye was to bring the mighty down from their seats, really. And he said, who is the man alive on this planet at the moment whom everybody admires? And the answer in those days was Albert Schweitzer. And he said, right, let's have a go at old Schweitzer. Which has always seemed to be a very good principle, both for journalism and in writing historical works. But what's so strange about history and stories of which you know the ending, Schweitzer, who in those days was a hero, is now regarded with horror by most people in Europe, and certainly everybody in Africa. Even though I still rather revere him for his musical abilities and his wonderful books on the New Testament. But most people seem to think his attitude to the Africans was appallingly patronising, not to say downright racist. And the letters he wrote to various of his fellow countrymen in Germany during the 1930s have rather established this point, because I didn't say that at a happy lunch. But they are rather hair-raising. So in a way, Claude Cockburn had got it right. I think that's the really rather extraordinary thing about not wishing to face these characters in the flesh, as it were. Well, here I am, and I've written this book called Old Times. I can't recommend it too highly to you, of course. I think you should certainly be buying lots of copies for Christmas. I think what happened in the course of our times was that at the beginning there were all these iconoclasts like Richard Ingrams or Claude Cockburn who were attacking great figures, really, and trying to bring down the mighty from their seats. But little by little, because the culture had so much declined by the end of the Second World War, though few people realised it, what was happening was that the great men themselves were all turning into buffoons. And that most of the great politicians and so forth were figures in the past. By the 1960s and 70s, we were looking forward to the era of John Prescott and Jackie Smith. I mean, they were only clouds no bigger than a man's hand at that stage, but there were all these extraordinary figures coming up as harbingers of what was to come. Figures like dear old George Brown, the Foreign Secretary, who we all love and remember with great affection. And indeed, without him, Private Eye would never have had their famous phrase, tired and emotional, to describe his condition on many occasions. There was that wonderful moment, which was probably the glory moment, not only of history, but of the British Foreign Office, when he went to a legation in South America, and representing Her Britannic Majesty, heard the music start in a great ballroom like this and advanced on this luscious creature, wearing a long scarlet shimmering silk dress, and said, darling, may we dance? And the reply was, Mr. Brown, we may not dance, and that for 3 reasons. The first is, I'm afraid that you've had too much to drink. The second is that this is not a waltz, as you suppose, it's the Peruvian national anthem. The third is, luscious creature I may be, but I am also the Cardinal Archbishop of Lima.